Good afternoon. My name is Glenn, and I'm here with Ryan, and we're happy to introduce you to a little webinar we're going to do called Keep Calm and Integrate DevOps into Azure. I'll give just a moment here, and we'll get started. Okay, folks, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the world of DevOps and specifically kind of talk about what is DevOps. Give you a brief introduction of us, go through our understanding of DevOps and what you may, some conceptions of what you may have maybe heard of what DevOps is or what DevOps can be and how to execute and implement. We're going to give you a little rundown on what the C.A.L.M.S model is, what that acronym means, what each piece of the acronym stands for, how that relates to the bigger holistic DevOps picture. And also talk a little bit about some practical applications of DevOps, stuff that we've seen through our organization, 10th Magnitude, as well as stuff that we've worked on in our previous past lives, and some of our customers that have gone through the DevOps iterations and cycles. Start off with a little bit of introduction here. 10th Magnitude, we are a professional services and managed services firm, specifically focused on Azure. We are a niche firm. We focus primarily on Azure. And our goal is to really bring the cloud and help organizations through digital transformation process. We are 2016 and 2017 Azure Partner of the Year for the Central Region, as well as the 2017 Global Microsoft Hybrid Cloud and Infrastructure Platform Partner of the Year, an award we're certainly very proud of. We're part of the Azure Advisory and Azure Partner Council, and we've got locations headquartered in Chicago, as well as New York, Dallas, St. Louis, and Columbus. And our clients are reaching globally. A little bit of introductions about us, our presenters today. I'll give you an idea. Ryan, go ahead and take it away.
Hey everybody, this is Ryan Lee. I'm a lot of things here at 10th Magnitude. Solution architect, infrastructure engineer, automation engineer, community leader. I've got a focus in DevOps cultural integration and the tooling and workflows that enables a big push into containerization, Kubernetes, infrastructure as code, CI/CD, all that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Ryan. A little bit about myself as well. My name is Glenn Mate. I'm also a cloud solution architect here with 10th Magnitude. My focus is really on empowering development and operations. I work very closely with software development lifecycle improvements, talking about a lot of the same things that Ryan mentioned. So we're looking at continuous integration, continuous delivery, infrastructure as code, containerization, and really driving business value through the IT organization and kind of bringing those relationships. My personal favorite thing to do is really liaise between business requirements and technical execution and helping those two business units or multiple business units kind of foster growth and transparency between them. Both Ryan and myself have been in the cloud ecosystem for quite a while and in the DevOps ecosystem for at least just as long. So we want to give you kind of a good idea of what is DevOps. What is this mysterious term everybody talks about? Everybody wants it, but how do you get it? So, I'm going to start with a general definition. Gene Kim, who's really an evangelist, author of quite a few books, frequent keynote speaker at many DevOps-focused webinars, he defines DevOps as a professional movement that advocates collaborative working relationships between development and IT operations, resulting in the fast flow of planned work and increased reliability, stability, resilience, and security. Now, that sounds great, doesn't it? But it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And in my experience and Ryan's experience, for every Fortune 1000 company, for every small startup, for every medium-sized business that we've worked with, each organization embraces this definition in a unique way. To put it a little bit more bluntly, DevOps from a technical standpoint means caring enough about your job to learn all the little parts, not just the context of your role. Developers should understand infrastructure, and operation teams should understand code. It means that teams are running products, not projects, and that you maintain this product through the life cycle of the product in your environment or your organization, not just the length of the project to implement it.
Yeah, absolutely. DevOps is always totally unique to the company that implements it. DevOps is such a vague term that we feel like we kind of need to level set here. DevOps itself is just a collection of ideologies, practices, approaches. It takes the development lessons that the development community has learned over the course of decades and applies it both to the developer ecosystem, operations, security, QA, release management. Totally covers the entire IT cross-section. It's more than the sum of its parts. It's the idea that the application or project that you're delivering extends beyond just the code, extends beyond the libraries that it depends on, the operating system, the virtual machine, and the platform, whether that's on-prem or Azure. It's also an extension of the storage and the orchestration layer. It is the understanding that this thing that you're delivering is massive and requires collaboration between everybody responsible for both producing and delivering it.
That's a great point, Ryan. And with that being said, that's still, like you mentioned, a little bit vague in that it's so broad-reaching, the definition of DevOps. It encompasses so many different things, and so many organizations have a different conception of what DevOps is. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions of DevOps. What is DevOps not? Do you have any ideas or things there that you could maybe share with us?
Sure. So a lot of the things that I see people hang up on DevOps, they equate it to a collection of tools. They think, Chef, that's DevOps. Kubernetes, that's DevOps. Or they try to assemble a DevOps team that is responsible for all of the DevOps in your organization. And when you get a better understanding of what DevOps actually is, again, it's a collection of practices and approaches, you start to understand that you can't buy DevOps, though people have definitely tried to sell it. You can't buy it, but you can adopt it. You can practice it. And it's a top-down approach. Those tools are products of approaches and practices and workflows that you have to identify for your own company. You don't have to do continuous deployment. If you know what continuous deployment is, it's a developer makes a change to code and 5 minutes later it's pushed out to production via a complex set of gates and mechanisms and cross-checks and tests. You don't have to do that to practice DevOps. DevOps can be a small part of your organization. You can apply it to a small subset or a project, get the pattern down, and watch it grow. Going back to the DevOps team, it's not a title, it's a mentality. You can't have a DevOps engineer. All of your engineers and developers and security people, QA, should be practicing DevOps. But it's not a responsibility rather than a way to describe how to adopt that shared responsibility.
Exactly. It's the shared goals, really, right? We both, from an operations standpoint, from a development standpoint, want to see success of our software products, of our organization, of our business drivers. And you don't foster as much of that shared goal and collaboration by throwing things over the wall when you built them and expecting, hey, operations, go ahead and support these tools. Go ahead and make sure that this doesn't go offline. Sure, that's how plenty of organizations embrace some of their methodologies for implementation, but not what we're really looking for in the DevOps mindset. We're definitely looking to say, let's work on this together right from the get-go, from product conception all the way through to delivery and maintenance and keeping that product running and humming along in your organization days, weeks, months, or years after it's been implemented. And so when we talk about DevOps a lot, we talk about some of these misconceptions. We talked about, well, DevOps is more than just the sum of its parts. I'd like to talk about a little bit about building your house in your organization. So building a house is very comparable to maintaining what we would consider a high-velocity DevOps culture. If your house was being built, let's say you have a new plot of land, you've got a greenfield project, and you want to start. Your house is being built, there are components that are absolutely critical to the success of that project or of that product, of the end result. And so when we take a look and we break that out across, what we've got here, if we're using the house analogy, version control is the foundation of this house. And that ensures that artifacts, code, changes, those are committed, and that those changes aren't going to suddenly uproot on you or shift without your knowledge, ensuring that your foundation doesn't crumble from beneath you. Think of this even as a somewhat of a form of business continuity. If you can commit it to version control, you should. It is defined in fact when it is within a version control system. Continuing on, you've got configuration management, and this ensures that the structure of the house isn't going to change on you unless you're aware, and if it is, you can act accordingly and be notified. Testing on top of that ensures that you're building the house and that as you're building it, the pieces of the house aren't going to crumble and fall on top of you, causing injury, pain, suffering, or in the IT world, outages. And then continuous integration and delivery, that's your workforce. These are the set of pipeline tools and executions that allow you, the architect, to quickly provision additions to the house quickly, do the heavy lifting, and you know that you, the developers and operation teams, are overseeing the architecture and implementation with a degree of confidence over the blueprint. And so within the house model, all these pieces are critical to success. And keep in mind, much like Ryan said before, all of these pieces to encompass the DevOps mindset are patterns and practices, but they're not specific tools. For each of the items outlined here, there are dozens, hundreds of possible tools that we can integrate within our systems that are niche to maybe a particular product, particular business division, whatever the case may be. DevOps allows you to have the flexibility of choosing the tools that are right for you, but making sure that you adhere to these practices, approaches, and that you build your house in a safe and sound manner. So with that being said, DevOps is really about constantly evaluating, learning, evolving, remembering that you're never done. DevOps is about failing and leading and getting improvement out of your failure. And so there's characteristics of DevOps, things like speed, rapid delivery, reliability, scale, and others that really kind of grow out or are indicators of successful iterations and implementations of DevOps.
Yeah, and one note is one of the biggest business benefits of adopting this DevOps practice, it's a big reduction of risk. You take the institutional knowledge that has been developed over specific people or specific teams, you take the knowledge that they've created and you put that into code and you put that code into source control, and then you build the automation that does the things that your team members would have done. So if Brad's on vacation and you've got a release and you run into an issue or you have to perform a process that only Brad knows how to do, it's okay because he's put it into code, we put it into a CI/CD system. His expertise is now part of the process, and that process is something that you don't ever lose. You only grow it, you add to it, you maintain it, and you improve it.
That's a great point. So with the thing that you mentioned about somebody being on vacation, I mean, how many of you have had an A player, a Brad or a Brett, who when they're out, it's what do we do? Who's covering these responsibilities? Do we have to spend time bringing other people up to speed before this person leaves? If they leave, is there a way to reach this person? And in case there's an emergency. DevOps is about sharing and collaboration and breaking down those silos, not just between departments, but also within departments, and making sure that everyone has shared that information. And we take a look at these practices, and we've all been there before when it comes to that single A player who we just can't live without. And we want to kind of take that away and share that knowledge and experience and make sure that everybody can benefit from that. And so in regards to what does DevOps look like, it doesn't involve tearing things down. We're not here to take out existing business units within your IT department and replace them. We're looking really to craft and own and change the way that the existing processes work because, like we mentioned, DevOps is unique to every organization. There's no plug-and-play model for DevOps. We need to really take a look holistically at the organization and determine where can we model our execution practices around some of those DevOps house paradigms that we've discussed. DevOps can be a set of workflows or things that enable workflows. We talk about some practices and methodologies, Agile, for example, and a lot of people think that you put in a Kanban board and you talk every morning standing up for 15 minutes, and now you're doing the DevOps. And that's not necessarily the case. It's more than just the practices and how you meet and organize a project, but it's also about enabling the workflows that allow these projects and tasks within these projects to be executed quickly, rapidly, and repeatedly. And it's about building a seamless user experience. Think about some of the large organizations that that are doing DevOps. talk about Netflix, talk about Facebook, or any of the modern web-based retailers. Have you ever gone to buy something on Amazon and seen Amazon is down for maintenance? Have you ever gone to log in to watch your favorite, binge watch a season on Netflix and found that, it's not able to open up? Probably not, because those organizations have adopted extremely mature DevOps practices, and their ability to implement continuous delivery baked in directly into their operational pipeline and operational procedures, gives you the result of major releases, major upgrades, major maintenances to their systems. Does not incur user-facing downtime, and if the user-facing end of the application or the website is up, then it's pretty safe to say as well that on the back end and from that IT operation standpoint, the efficiency is trickling down there as well. So, when you go to use Netflix or Amazon, new features just appear. Users are unaffected. They're just simply informed. Some sites, Facebook for example, put new code into production multiple dozens or hundreds times a day. Do you think that's something that your organization could do today in your current environment? Try that with an old-style deployment, and you have to rebuild the entire platform and then roll it out as a monolithic change, and it's simply not possible. So understanding that this seamless user experience, it's an indicator of DevOps, and it's something that you should really look to strive for. Most of all, DevOps is not a free-for-all. A lot of people think that DevOps means that developers necessarily need to get production access and can do, whatever they want or need to, and we consolidate operations into development. Not necessarily the case. There are still strict sets of, limitations and role-based access control. The point within, though, is that the knowledge and the sharing still occurs across those boundaries and empowers everybody to share their role and share their responsibility. And so with that being said, we talked about, kind of what does DevOps look like. So let's talk about the C.A.L.M.S model, because we want to go ahead and we want to move forward to implement this DevOps field or organization, but we really need to have an understanding of, what does that look like at a more granular level, and we fall heavily on the C.A.L.M.S model of DevOps to kind of present that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the C.A.L.M.S model, which is culture, automation, lean, metrics, and sharing. We're going to go through each one of these one by one and give you a breakdown of what they mean, what do they look like within a DevOps organization, and maybe a little bit of, how can you move forward and implement that. Ryan, can you tell me a little bit about the culture of a DevOps organization?
Yeah, so we'll start with the first one, culture. It's a big part of DevOps is about breaking down the silos between teams. What does that mean? What does it mean to have a siloed organization? Glenn touched on it a little bit earlier, where he was talking about developers cutting a release and throwing it over the wall to the operations, security, and QA folks. Basically saying, hey, we've done our part, it's your job now. Take what we've created and run with it. It involves a lot of rework and confusion and people on that other side of the fence having to go back and open up channels of communication that don't really have a good way of being opened. It's about taking the people responsible for delivering a product and enabling them to work closer together so that they have faster feedback cycles, so that the operations and security people are consulted during the development process, or at least have some kind of insight into decisions that are being made that will inevitably affect them. So removing the lengthy feedback cycle between developers making a change or executing against a business objective and then finding out if it actually worked, that's part of what DevOps is, reducing that feedback cycle. Again, you don't have to do a total top-down implementation of everybody doing DevOps all at the same time. A lot of what we've seen have a crazy amount of success. Is you pick a small project and you implement a pipeline. You figure out how to take code that this developer is working on, or this team of developers are working on, and put it in the hands of somebody who actually uses it. You look at that process and you figure out the bottlenecks and important key people that should have their knowledge put down into code. And that's where you get your framework. That's how you figure out what type or what aspects of DevOps are relevant to you and what tools are best used to implement those. And again, it's not about everybody doing the same job. Everybody still has roles. People are still developers. People are still responsible for operations and security. They just work a lot closer together.
Absolutely. And so we talk about culture. Culture is kind of the foundational piece of the entire, DevOps methodology. When we talk about if you can't lock in the culture, if people aren't bought in your organization, either at a management level or, even at the individual contributor level, then this is not going to be a paradigm that works for your organization. So we have to have a team that wants to work together, that wants to collaborate, and from there, the rest of the C.A.L.M.S model, the automation, the metrics, the lean, the sharing, kind of falls into play almost organically. Not to say that there's not any work to do to get those to a mature state, but culture will help foster this need and this desire to grow in this direction. And so when we talk about automation in the realm of the C.A.L.M.S model, we're not talking about tooling. We're talking about the principles of automation that enable you to choose the tools, but not the tooling explicitly itself. And so automation is an indicator of a successful DevOps implementation. Ask yourself today, how many times are you building your software and releasing? Is this a daily, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? And that would, any organization, if you're purchasing software and you say, well, I get a new release once every 8 months, we're probably not doing too much of a close of a DevOps model of an automation implementation. We want to kind of reduce the total cycle time that it takes to bring a product to market, to bring bug fixes of that product to market, new versions, smaller feature sets. And so automation is the paradigm that allows us to do that. Now, buying tools, like we said, it doesn't equal DevOps. If you've heard some of the great tools that can empower a DevOps transformation before, things you've maybe heard of, Terraform, Chef, Jenkins, and these tools, we can move forward and we can implement them, but just having that tool set doesn't make us a DevOps-focused organization or a DevOps-centric practitioner. It just means that we're using these tools and trying to maybe shoehorn some things into there. Automation and the tooling that we choose to support automation is about scaling, it's about enabling, it's about driving value for the organization and the business into smaller cycles. But automation isn't necessarily required for DevOps as well. You can, most situations will naturally enable the use of automation, but there are some niche situations where sometimes a manual process is appropriate or necessary. So don't discount all the processes or look to necessarily automate all the things all the time. Every scenario needs to be evaluated on a one-by-one basis. And a lot of times when you look at implementing automation, as you're starting your DevOps journey, you really need to take a look across, what you've got in your organization to determine where are the immediate values to automation that will help drive our cycle. And that's something we'll talk a little bit in the lean section. But as you grow your automation portfolio, it might start with a few scripts, some chunks of manual tasks that you decide to automate. You then chain those automation steps. You build automation pipelines where we're doing end-to-end, maybe configuration of a server, or building of a software package, and then building a server with that software package installed, and then now we're rolling those out on a regular basis. You get to this form of a DevOps nirvana at some point where you're empowering your business units to use the automation. So this isn't just, well, how does automation benefit my team, my IT administrators, my operational executors, but automation will eventually drive, how can I empower my business to provide them something like a self-service portal where when a developer needs a VM, there doesn't have to be a ticket which requires approval and then has to go through another organizational level. How can we offer a self-service portal where everything in that portal is built within an automation framework that also falls within our policy and compliance, so that we can enable business users to request application demo environments on their own, or we can enable developers to request acceptance environments to do testing of the latest features before they roll them out or make changes. So there are plenty of different ways that this automation can ultimately roll up as your organization grows to be an enabler of your business practices. And so as we continue to go down that path, we'll talk a little bit about how does lean figure into this. And for those of you who aren't familiar with lean is really a manufacturing principle. When we talk about moving parts through the warehouse step by step and fabricating, think of that supply chain. Maybe we're building a car, or we're boxing and packaging materials on a conveyor belt. There are steps that we have to execute one by one as we go down the pipeline to build your software. First, maybe build that server, then build the package, then apply the package or install the package to the server. Then we're going to install certain components on the server, third-party tools, then we're going to run some testing, and all of these step-by-step pieces that we execute in a line, usually linearly, really composes what we would call a value stream map. And so when we look at the lean principle is to identify where on this value stream map are products sitting idle, is time being wasted. And for example, if you want to build an application environment, if I have to create a ticket, wait 20 minutes for that ticket to be picked up by the help desk, who then assigns it to the infrastructure team, who then builds the server, reassigns the ticket to an application team, which installs the application on it. But the application team has to get the database team involved through another ticket to get the database set up. There are a lot of idle time processes in this value stream that are really reducing your ability to deliver that product in a timely manner. And so one of the paradigms of lean and ultimately of DevOps is to identify where in that value stream is work sitting idle, is time being wasted, and how can we close those gaps, and through the use of automation, through the use of collaboration, and through the use of metrics and sharing, to really take all the idle time out and then have an end-to-end seamless experience where we can say we need an environment, push a button, and all the steps that normally would be executed through previous processes now kick off in a chain of executed events and provide us with the end artifact almost immediately or within an almost agile scale of time. So in that regard, there are concepts of the lean methodology that we take away from certain different kinds of manufacturing things. And so you'll hear phrases or terms like Kaizen or Kata, and this comes from some of the Japanese manufacturing terms. So we're looking at things like Toyota. So Kaizen may have the idea of the change for the better or continuous improvement. And this is about, change is sometimes painful in an organization, and what may not seem logical but empowers your business is something certainly that we want to embrace and continuously improve and make these changes as frequent as often as possible. Get away from batch processes where we queue up lots of work and do it all at once. Let's break those batch processes into small iterations and execute them immediately as soon as they're available to be ready. And that's kind of where Kata comes in. And so if you have code Kata, well, let's take a step back. Kata is an exercise in karate where you repeat a form many, many, many times, making small improvements each time you execute it. And so if you do things 100 times, it's fair to say that by the 100th time you've done it, you are far better at doing it than you were the first time you've done it. And so within a development practice, Kata is where you can take the practice of, instead of making one large, very big change and implementing it twice a year. Well, if that's the case, then your software delivery, if you're only delivering a product twice a year, you're not very great at delivering a product because you don't do that frequently. So if we break software deployment into something that you do once a week, you're now getting, instead of 2 deployments a year, you're getting 52 deployments a year. And it's pretty safe to say that at the end of a year, if we went the latter route, after 52 deployments, you're probably much more comfortable with deploying code. And so take that principle and put that across your entire organization, rather than breaking out changes into, well, we're going to make 5,000 lines of code changes in a chunk. Change 1 line of code at a time. And suddenly, what may be painful at first, through the principle of Kaizen and Kata, you'll find that becomes a much easier, manageable task that you can quickly iterate over and get better at in a much shorter time frame. And so lean is about thinking about increasing your customer value, eliminating waste. Your management is a facilitator of your operational execution, and focusing on the long-term goals by doing continual improvement in the short-term cycles. And the essence of lean really is to just deliver value to the customer and continuously improve your ability to deliver that value by removing the waste and just focusing on the value stream and bringing things in closer and closer together as you can. And so subsequent to lean, now we look at the concept of metrics.
Well, one note before we move on completely from lean, you're able to distill this lean approach into the process, and that process is implemented with the code and workflows that code is actually implementing. So it's another way to ensure that all stakeholders have input and insight into the process, and the process is now part of your product. The process is what gets iterated on and improved and stored as itself an artifact, and that is part of your company's IP and your company's shared knowledge. So it becomes very, very valuable. And so the next part of the C.A.L.M.S model is metrics. Metrics are often overlooked and incredibly important. There's really no value in moving fast if you can't tell how fast you're moving or what benefits that you're getting out of this process. You can follow these philosophies and approaches and feel good about following them, but at the end of the day, you need to know that they have some kind of meaningful impact into your business or process. So figuring out how to identify the analytics that your business stakeholders are interested in, and show that the business value in the process and the work that you've been doing, or that your teams have been doing. If you're able to collect metrics that show that you're able to deploy much faster, you're able to deploy over the course of 3 days instead of 3 months, then you can show that you're able to get there. Your time to market is much shorter, and you're able to get much more efficient use out of your developers and your IT staff. So not only are you getting more efficiency out of your IT, but you're delivering more valuable, more reliable value to your consumers. Metrics also give us an opportunity to see what needs to be improved. That is the key to self-introspection in a DevOps system from the technological standpoint. The more we know about the process, the more we know about its effects and its benefits, the more information we have to thereby improve it.
And that's about being preemptive about failure and scenarios and finding problems before they happen, and really kind of just tying in the bigger picture of DevOps is, one of the indicators of successful DevOps organizations around the metrics is that they know when things are going to go haywire. They know, when customer load's going to increase. They know when they're going to have to ramp up their need to accommodate, certain kind of changes in their business, and those kind of that knowledge and that analytics and that introspection about their own business and how does that apply and affect their IT organization comes from the usage of metrics. And these aren't metrics that you acquire over the course of a day. This is metrics that are acquired over the course of your DevOps pattern. And then when we talk about, going through the DevOps life cycle, we say frequently that, fail fast and fail reliably. And it's okay to fail. And you're going to learn a lot through the failures that you have as an organization, and the data that you get out of that failure ensures that you, one, that failure won't happen again, but two, that the metrics that back that can help facilitate interesting discoveries about the business and the way that maybe your software is used, or the way that your operational team is executing or being reactionary to certain things, and to build a better feedback loop onto how you can improve your overall performance as an organization. So the analytics, telemetry data, if there's a number or a metric that happens out of something that you're doing in part of your software delivery pipeline, part of your CPU performance of your server, application metrics and the APM monitoring, whatever the case may be, if there's a way to measure it, you should be quantifying and capturing that metric and storing it. And from a historical purpose, there will come a day when that data provides a value. There's no doubt about that. So store that data, aggregate those metrics, and determine how you can use that data to drive business decisions, the direction of your development, and the organization and the software that you're practicing within. And so we talk about collecting all this data, and what do we do with the data and the things that we learn from basically our software practices. And really that just comes down to the fact that you share it. You build this culture and this collaboration and this data set and this automation, and it just feeds into each other. And we talk heavily about failure is not a blame game. You should expect to fail in any organization. And we don't talk about huge project failures. We're talking about outages, things going offline, deployments not going as planned, bumps in the road, having a post-mortem process that's blameless, ensuring that we're not pointing fingers at somebody who maybe forgot to upload a flat file to a configuration folder. That's not an indicator of somebody not doing their job. That's an indicator that we didn't test that that file was there before we moved forward with rolling this product and putting it in front of the customer. And so that indicates that there's an opportunity for change, or to make sure that that doesn't happen again by either building a process or ideally through automation and testing, ensuring that something like that can't be done. So the failure aspect, if you fail every day, you're going to learn something new about your business, and if you can put a safeguard or an automation testing, some kind of something in place to build that, if you fail every day, at the end of the year, you've got 365 new safeguards in place that make your product that more reliable, resilient, and scalable. While those failures may be painful, as you go through more of them, like we mentioned with Kata, doing things more frequently, you're going to get better at quickly identifying failures, fixing failures, and ultimately you become preemptive to failures. And you begin fixing things before they break. And that's how your product becomes resilient, scalable, and that is, again, another indicator of a successful DevOps organization in that regard. So when we talk about enabling other teams and business units, we're collecting this data. We're building a big picture about our organization, about our software, about the way we operate. And the goal is not to say, well, the business wants A, B, and C, so we're going to develop it, and then we're just going to hand it off to them. It's about keeping the business in the loop, using the tools and the practices that you have to enable not just your internal IT team, but also bring the business into the play and share that information and share that data. And, rather than saying the business wants the software, it takes us 6 months to deploy it, that's what they're getting. Bring them into the picture and see where the business is willing to make compromises to get the product out the door faster, among others.
Yeah, so there's an aspect of that I wanted to touch on about how failure is not something to be hidden or feel shame about. Failure implies that you are aware of the problem and you know how to fix it and you know how to put that back into your process, and that's something that should be, again, shared with your team. That should be showcased. You should be celebrated for fixing this issue permanently, or at least understanding the process by which it happened, which allows you to be less likely to make the same mistake again.
Absolutely. So we've got this big picture now. We understand what DevOps is. We've got a good understanding of the culture and how automation, lean, and metrics can help empower that. And so the C.A.L.M.S model is something that if you take this C.A.L.M.S and take this back to your organization, write it down on a whiteboard, get your whole team in the room and understand how can we practically apply this model to our organization. And on day one, they're going to be things that don't fit. There are going to be things that are going to sound like that'll never happen here, or that's just not the way we do things. And the whole point about starting this is that you don't try to tackle the whole beast at once. It's about how can you actually slowly but surely move in that direction. DevOps isn't the kind of thing that you sprinkle some magic fairy dust on your organization and overnight you're delivering software in a day. This is a process that is going to be something that you've got to work towards, and you've got to really, really have an investment in. And so in that regard, we'll talk about practical, applications of DevOps. And so I'm going to speak a little bit from my experience. Because in my history, I was both, while I work with 10th Magnitude now as a cloud solution architect, I've also been a customer of 10th Magnitude in the past, and I've worked in helping software companies manage the delivery of their products. And in my experience, and I worked for a retail energy company based out of Connecticut, we had a legacy product built on PHP that was being developed, and releases were probably, I'd say, about every month, which was pretty good for a software organization, but those releases were extremely painful. All-nighters, weekends, the same mistakes happening on a regular basis. And we need to really take a methodology that would allow us to kind of circumvent some of these problems. One of the things we knew that we needed to do was get our developers in the room with the infrastructure teams more frequently. And so we started this, we embraced what we would consider to be an agile approach, but we included that it wasn't just the software team in the agile approach. We brought the operations teams into the room, and out the gate I would say that this was a process that didn't see any, nobody was fighting it, but it didn't seem like it delivered much value immediately. And only when we were brought in to sit in with deployments that were actually occurring, we were able to identify issues with the software team, because the software team was doing deployments, and they'd have to call infrastructure up in the middle of the night if there was an issue with the deployment. By keeping operations in the room with them when they were doing deployments, we were actually able to identify issues as the software developers were moving through their processes and actually fix a bunch of issues before the code got rolled out. And that was just one particular deploy, and that was like the light bulb went off, and we said, geez, you know, we got to get operations in the room with the software team every time we do a deploy. That's a no-brainer. How did we never do something like this? And we realized through that experience that by bringing those two teams together on it, not just during deployments, but now let's do it when they're coding. Let's bring them in the room and we're going to talk about how we're going to implement a new feature in the application. Let's get their weigh in on what they think would work as a part of the deployment process. And as you start to have those conversations, you start to realize the value of things, and that developers are pretty apt to understanding infrastructure, and that the infrastructure guys and the operation guys are actually pretty apt to understand how the code needs to be maintained in the long run. And those two will bring together kind of this seamless ebb and flow of knowledge to make things happen. And so that's just my experience in an organization that I've worked for directly. But you know, if we want to talk about what we've done for other organizations, we can talk about, you know, even companies that are already high velocity, who are maybe releasing software on a very frequent basis, but go through a lot of struggles delivering, you know, platform agnostic tooling or creating scalable infrastructure. You know, Ryan, do you have an example that you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. So one of the biggest examples, they're actually one of the largest consumers of Azure in the world. They are a document discovery company, and they're full in on Azure. We've managed to implement the workflows and processes that DevOps enables using tools that have native Azure support, tools like Chef and Terraform and Jenkins that can call out to deploy infrastructure and be that kind of central repository. We built out this self-service model where developers and for their trade show, they can spin up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of environments all at the same time and know that they're going to be delivered in exactly the same way. Their production deployment has also been automated, so we're able to deploy new tenants in an extremely fast way. Something that used to take weeks is now down to a day. And there's definitely still speed bumps. Again, you're never really done with DevOps. DevOps is not something that you can attain, but it is a target to work towards. And they've seen a ton of value out of it.
And so, you know, we're very excited about DevOps on a regular basis. We are, you know, 10th Magnitude is an Azure-only consulting firm, and so we talk about all the time with our clients, our customers, Fortune 1000, how do you use Azure to empower this DevOps movement? How does Azure become one of the core integral pieces of the puzzle? Azure, just for a start, you know, Azure has a huge support for the open source community. Azure is frequently adding new Linux distributions to their portfolio. They work with great partners like HashiCorp. They are contributing. They've open sourced a lot of their technologies. You look at their container engines. You look at their, even their, you know, the Microsoft language in the Windows Server. You know, look at your Bash on Windows. Look at PowerShell being open sourced. Microsoft's all about an open platform to be used by everybody, and that's really what the DevOps methodology is about. It's about sharing, it's about being open and being able to collaborate and use these tools anywhere. So Azure is obviously, in my opinion, I'm sure Ryan would agree, it's a no-brainer when you're looking to optimize your organization and to empower your organization, taking the power of cloud. And that's what we do for our customers, our clients, and that's kind of what we evangelize, is how can we help you using Azure and all the other tools and principles of DevOps to really become an agile, fast, quick organization with you know, quicker business cycles to get your products and solve those business challenges. And so, you know, as a wrap for this discussion today, we've gone through a lot of what is DevOps. We want to just, you know, give a second to take any questions from the audience on this webinar. So, you know, if you've got, we'll give it about, you know, 30 seconds. Take a look at the questions that are in here, and then we will follow up with any of them. And if you've got a question, feel free to drop one in the webinar now. Just a moment, and we will get started with questions.
And after we're done answering questions, we'll get some next and some quick start tips.
So we've got one coming in here. Let's see, we've got a question here that says, please clarify grassroots versus top-down in your opening statement around executive sponsoring and support for DevOps in an organization. That's a great question. And, how do you get started with DevOps? Ryan, what are your thoughts? And then I'll give you a weigh in and give my thoughts.
Sure. So, like the question says, there's really only two ways to go about this. Either you start out with grassroots support, a few developers or a team lead or director does some research around DevOps or has had some experience coming in new to the organization or just wants to change. That's a great pilot system. They can enable themselves to move fast and take all the benefits of the DevOps approach and deliver fast and codify these best practices. That's the process that they get to create and the benefits that they then get to showcase to the other teams. So grassroots is leading by example. Top-down, I usually don't see as much success from this because DevOps is a huge change culturally, technologically, process. Coming down from the top, you usually meet some resistance from a certain team or some certain team members that don't see the value, don't see the benefit. They know that they're able to do their job right now, and why would you change it if it's working for you right now? So again, the best way that I've seen to kind of counteract that is movement by example. Expanding that example onto other teams and enabling them to
Absolutely.
approaches.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about, doing this grassroots approach is that you don't need budget. DevOps is not a set of tools. You don't need to go out and buy a bunch of expensive licenses to do DevOps. That's not the way it works. You can empower DevOps in an organization that uses cloud, that doesn't use cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So, we talk about pull aside a project. Choose a project that you think would fit within some of these paradigms. Choose a team member to kind of start the waves, so to speak, right? And talk about how we can foster that collaboration and that culture. And the rest of the pieces will follow suit. But if you're in an organization and you say, well, I want to do this DevOps thing, but I don't know, how are we going to get this to be embraced? It's about choosing a product, empowering it, putting some lines around it or some rails around it that will make you able to deliver that product faster with more feedback and work directly with the business. And pretty soon other business units and other product owners are going to come to you and say, I see the way that this person has their product working, and I really, really, really think that we need to do that for this product. Because the innovation and the agility that you're going to drive in your products by starting to embrace these methods, it's going to be a no-brainer. It's a win-win. Everybody wants to deliver their products faster and get their ideas. When marketing says, I want to put this on our website, I want to put this feature in this application. If marketing, you have to tell that business development or that business unit, oh, that's a 6-month out product. Nobody wants to hear that. But if you can start to empower a single application or product to do things faster and smaller changes, pretty soon other business units are going to want that, and you're going to become really the enabler and the evangelist of that movement within your organization. So start small. Don't try to chew off the whole piece. Find a team or a business unit that you can work with that really wants to embrace this and kind of just grow it from there. I'm going to take a look here and give you just another minute to drop any more questions if you have into the presenter, the audience chat here. Well, we're not getting any more questions here, guys, so we just wanted to take a moment and say thank you. Go ahead and take us. We go back to our, let me pull it back up here. And just, we've got some resources for you that are here on the screen. Definitely recommend taking a look at some of 10th Magnitude's resources. Guys like ourselves, we're an organization that is, Azure first, DevOps focused, open source focused. So if you want to learn more about how can you empower your organization, how can you kind of start the movement, what are some of the principles of C.A.L.M.S and how are those applicable, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to speak with anyone at any given time, but of course there's plenty of cool resources here. Give them a try. Let us know if you've got any questions, and of course, keep calm and DevOps on.